Hello there, Internet. So, I I foolishly made a prediction at the beginning of the year. Well, not a prediction, a plan at the beginning of the year that I would read a set number of books. I planned out which books I was going to read month by month, with one classic read and one modern read. Sometimes those reads would be a collection of books rather than just the one book. I apologise, by the way, if I sound raspy or if you can hear me sucking on a locket. My chest is still really not very good. I'm probably going to be coughing and spluttering. I'll cut out any coughs so that you don't have to put up with hearing me hacking my guts up. But I thought I'd go over, now that it is the 1st of May, we are in the second section of the year. I prefer to cut the year into thirds. I don't know why, it just fits well for me. So January through April, first third, and then we've got May, June, July and August as the next third. Thirds, I don't know why, but thirds feel more right to me. I know it's normal to cut it into quarters because those are the natural seasons, but let's face it, the seasons don't fit the year properly. December is clearly winter, but it's the end of the year, but January and February is still the winter. Yet some people consider January, February and March to be the winter, which makes no sense at all because March was always spring when I was a kid. I remember November being considered winter when I was a kid. It's weird, it's like the seasons have shifted. Anyway, I like to start at the beginning of the year. January through April is my first section of the year. Then I have May through August, and then September through to the end of the year feels like its own section of the year. I think it also fits well with the academic year and things like that. And that's probably why I feel that way. So I consider this to be my summer section. How well did I do in my first third? Well, not as well as I'd hoped. I got some reading done, but not as much as I wanted. January, I was due to read 2 books. I was reading The Hod King by Josiah Bancroft. It's in this little plastic sheet that I've got, which I'm getting for most of my paperbacks now. These are basically like library sheets to keep them safe. I was backing my books in plastic in accordance to the method that is on YouTube by Brian Lee Durfee. He shows a method where you can back your books in plastic. I've done it to a couple of them, and it's really good. The problem is it's time consuming, and it's really difficult to do without getting little bubbles in them. Whereas these sheets, they're less tight, obviously, they're less effective, but you can slip them on really easily. So I've got a load of them, and I'm going to whack them onto my books as I'm reading them, and then I'll slowly try backing them in plastic when I've got spare time, because honestly, I have hundreds of books, and it'll take me forever to pack them all in plastic. But anyway, The Hod King. I loved Semlin Ascends. I loved Arms of the Sphinx even more. So The Hod King I was very excited to read, and yet it took me a long time. I enjoyed it, but for some reason I struggled to actually find the time to read. January, I actually started in December, I believe. January I read very little of The Hod King. And that was because I decided I wanted to read at least one classic per month, and I chose Wuthering Heights as my January classic. And the reason I chose it was because it was also a classic being read on other YouTube channels. And I thought it would be good to read along with other people who are reading the same classics. And yeah, that seemed like a good plan. I quickly hit a roadblock when I realised I couldn't read this. Back in January, I opened this and it was too complicated. This is written in an older style of prose that I'm not overly familiar with. And the fact is, I'm used to reading modern text. And this is too anachronistic. It's too oldie Englishy. And it's not very old English. It's not like Shakespeare. But it still wasn't modern prose, and I found it distracting. I found I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't follow it properly. So I ended up going away and watching multiple TV adaptations of Wuthering Heights before I came back to read this again. And again, the same thing's happening with this. If you can see, the edge of the book is peeling. This happens with almost every paperback I read. The edge starts to peel. This is why I back them in plastic. I don't know why. Am I doing something weird to books to make them peel like this? Like, I look after them, like, the pages aren't badly broken. I don't break the spine. I try to look after my books, but every book I read, they start to peel down the edge, and I don't know why. By the way, this is very deceptive. This looks like a really thin, really quick read. It looks like it's significantly smaller than the Hod King. The text is tiny, and the pages are very full. So yeah, this is a lot longer than it looks. So Wuthering Heights took up most of January for me. I since now have this really nice leather-bound selected works of the Bronte sisters, which includes Wuthering Heights. And when I go back to the Bronte sisters, I'm going to be going back to this book. This is a very, very nice book, and I'm looking forward to reading from this. I will have to go back because Wuthering Heights is a book that I'm going to want to reread. It was a difficult one for me, and I find that it's going to be a barometer by which I feel I can check whether or not I'm keeping up with my English skills. As a native English speaker, and my first language being English, it is a crying shame that I struggle as much as I do with older examples of English. It shouldn't be that hard for me, and I want to rectify that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to read things like Wuthering Heights at least a couple more times so that I am familiar with the text and I can say that I'm okay with the style. I'm also going to go back and read Jane Austen as well and see if that will help, because again, Jane Austen's text's similar in a way, but I went into them having seen adaptations before, so I knew the stories, which I think made a big difference. So that was my January, but it was also my February, because I spent so long in January reading Wuthering Heights that February became dominated by reading The Hod King. And this meant that my February reads basically didn't happen. And that was a shame. I had a few things in mind that I wanted to read. I wanted to give Moby Dick a try, as my classic read, and I fell into the same issue with Moby Dick. I read a couple of chapters in, and I found it was a little too harsh in its prose, that I didn't feel I was getting into it. I didn't feel I was absorbing it well. So I want to come back to it. It's a book that I DNF'd after only a few chapters, and I thought, okay, I'm going to come back to this when I feel more confident. And I continued reading The Hod King. My other read was supposed to be Recursion by Blake Crouch, which should be a really simple, really quick read. I never even picked it up. I've read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I know I like his writing style. I know it's a quick and simple read. It would be one that I would enjoy, and yet I never actually got round to it because I spent my time reading The Hod King, and I didn't actually put as much time into reading as I'd hoped. So then came March, and I thought, okay, March, I could read Recursion and I could read Moby Dick now, but then I'm going to be falling back. I'm going to be falling behind. So I thought, okay, let's just write off February. Those were the least interesting books out of the list anyway. They were not books that anyone has specifically said they want to hear my take on. They were books that I wanted to read. So we can move on, and we can always read them at a later date. There's going to be time in the future. So, March books. I had a good reading month in March. The thing is, March was a relaxing read, because I spent time reading stuff I was familiar with. With March, I was reading A Game of Thrones, which was a reread, and I read Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is a shorter read. It's a more modern read. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I read from the Folio Society book, which I haven't got out because I don't want to handle the books unnecessarily. But it's a lovely book, and same with the Game of Thrones folio. It was a lovely book. I read through the first volume of A Game of Thrones, reread that. Then I read Something Wicked This Way Comes. I never actually read the second volume of A Game of Thrones. It means I didn't even really finish that, but it is a book I've read before. So March was a successful reading month in that I got plenty of reading done, but I still only really read 1.5 books, which is less than I'd hoped. Admittedly, one of those is A Game of Thrones, which is twice, if not 3 times, the size of most books. Then came April. So far, I have not finished a single month and actually read all the books I intended. I've either read half the books intended or actually read none. But I still have managed to read my way through The Hod King, Wuthering Heights, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is nice. I've enjoyed what I've read. April, I had a different plan in mind. I have this leather-bound copy of the works of Jules Verne. This is a really, really very nice leather-bound copy. It's another one of what's the set called? It's the Canterbury Classics, I believe. Yes, the Canterbury Classics from San Diego. It's a very, very nice book. I have had a flick through it. I've read the opening chapter, which is basically the life of Jules Verne. That's as far as I got. April has been one hell of a painful month for me. See, the problem was, there was a reason I was falling behind in March with my reading. It's the reason I didn't finish Game of Thrones was I got kind of absorbed into video games. In March, I was playing Horizon Forbidden West. I knew I was going to be playing video games. I knew this. So I planned to have a reread, specifically for that reason. I then, in the beginning of April, started playing Elden Ring. Elden Ring is fantastic, by the way. Now, I didn't think too much of this. I only had one book to read, Jules Verne. The other stuff I was going to be reading was audiobook, because I was going to be taking on an audiobook challenge, which was to go through the complete works that I had on audiobook, which included Child of God, The Road, Blood Meridian, and No Country for Old Men, from Cormac McCarthy. Now, that I have successfully managed to do. I have listened to the audiobooks, because audiobooks you can listen to without having to look at a book. This is a handy little difference, because I have been so incredibly ill. From about the second week of April, I have spent most of my time in bed. I had developed a rather nasty chest infection, which I'm still in recovery from, hence the coughing, the spluttering, the menthol sweets to try and soothe my throat. I'm on antibiotics. I'm trying to clear this after weeks of having to cancel any social engagements. I've cancelled my in-person D&D games because I didn't want other people to catch this. It's not COVID, by the way. I thought it might have been at first, but it's not. It's just a chest infection. I finally feel like I may be in recovery now that I've started the antibiotics. But it's been slow going, and I've not felt like doing much of anything. Some days I literally slept for 18 hours a day. Other days I sat there and I had YouTube videos just kind of also playing while I was in a daze. I barely paid attention to them. One day I, honest to God, sat and binged a season and a half of The Office because I couldn't focus on anything that required real effort. So yeah, it's been a hard month, and I have not wanted to pick up a book. The last week especially, I have not read for more than 20 minutes in a single day, and for I think 6 days in a row I didn't pick up a book at all. That was telling. So what I ended up with is an April where I have barely touched what I was going to read, and a May that I'm looking at my TBR, and I'm thinking, this is going to be harder and harder to meet, because I have not managed to establish that practice. So what does this mean going forwards? Well, I still want to keep to my TBR. I haven't managed to read Moby Dick, which is annoying. And I haven't managed to do my reread of A Game of Thrones properly. But I managed to read most of the other stuff. Jules Verne I still want to read. So come to May, I'm thinking I have Jules Verne and I have the Robert Louis Stevenson book by the same maker. They look fairly similar. I'm thinking I'm going to flick through those, and rather than read all 7 books from the Robert Louis Stevenson collection and all, I think it's 4 or is it 5 in the Jules Verne collection? 4. All 4 novels in the Jules Verne collection. I think I may pick and choose and flip back and forwards between them so I can get a taste for both. And I'm still going to try and read Book of the New Sun. This means I will still have read at least some of everything I wanted to read, with the exception of Moby Dick and Recursion. Recursion I can always fit in at the end of the year. I have a really easy December. So for the next third of the year, I have May. Book of the New Sun is going to dominate. I have my paperbacks ready. That's my focus. I want to put out a video where I discuss my thoughts on Cormac McCarthy and his writing, his audiobooks specifically, my opinions on them. I've got quite a fair bit to say on that. Then June, I'm supposed to be reading through the Foundation trilogy, which again I have a really nice leatherbound of. I'm going to still go for that, and I also have The Fall of Babel, which is the sequel to The Hot King. It's about the same length as well. It might be a bit longer actually. I'm really looking forward to The Fall of Babel. I don't foresee any issues there, as long as I actually spend the time reading and I don't get sick again. July is going to be the big test for me. July, I have The Master and Margarita as my classic read. One that I've been looking forward to because it's a very topical, very interesting book on censorship, on government overreach, things like that. It was written in Stalinist Russia at a time when the censors were very, very high, and it is a Christian critique on the atheistic... shut up. Bloody stupid phone. On the enforced atheistic fascist state that was Soviet Russia. But it wasn't published at the time because it would have been illegal. So it spent a few years kind of bouncing backwards and forwards from various different places before it got published about 20 odd years later. And even then it was published in an incomplete form. I think it didn't get published until the 70s in its complete form. So I'm interested to see what is in this that critiques the society that it was built into. I suspect I'm going to have issues with some of it. As an atheist myself, I suspect that there's going to be parallels drawn between fascism and atheism that I'm going to vehemently disagree with. But I have to consider that the author was writing this from a perspective of someone who was living in a fascist state that was avowedly atheistic, and would have seen those things as being entwined. So I'll try not to hold that against the author. But Master and Margarita, while I'm looking forward to that, the big one for me is going to be J.R. Abercrombie's First Law. July, I'm intending to read the entirety of the First Law trilogy. And I still do. I have all 3 of the books right there. I'm looking at them now. They're over there. I still think this is doable. I have nothing else on in July. July is going to be a very hot, very uncomfortable day. I'm probably going to be just lying in bed with a fan on, doing very little else. So I'm going to be quite pleased to do that. August is Dune and The Name of the Wind. Again, books that I can see sitting on the shelf right over there. Nothing to stop me from reading from them. I'm I think that this is all very doable. I'm going to go into September and December after that. I'm going to focus on just what I'm doing for the summer months, which is May through August. Now, looking at what I've got there, I think that it's all reasonably doable, and it's all something that I'm going to enjoy. But it all depends on me remaining calm, me remaining well, and me focusing on my reading. So I'm going to try and get back into posting reading sprints and things like that. I'm going to try and get to a point where I can be reading for hours on end and posting something up to encourage that reading. I also want to do other things as well, though. I also want to talk about gaming. I want to talk about role playing. I've got other videos I want to put up soon. So it's not the only focus for the channel, but I do want to get this habit down. Because one of the things that's annoying me at the moment is how many books I have that I want to read and how little time I seem to be able to devote to it. And in that vein, I have been keeping a bullet journal where I have been developing a coloured system where I mark the hours and what I've been doing for each hour with different colours representing different things that I've done on those days. And it's quite a good system. Some of these I've not coloured in yet, but I've got different plans to mark off each hour and mark exactly what it is I'm doing on those days. I think it's going to work nicely. I want to keep a track of how many hours I spend doing everything. And each time I do something, I'm going to open the journal and just mark it on so I know what I did with that time. I found over April, admittedly April was a bad month to trial this with because I was so ill. Almost every day I spent the majority of the time, I would say 80% of the day, with either sleep or idle time. Now I define idle time as any time when I'm not doing anything in particular. So if I'm scrolling through Twitter or chatting on Discord or Gilded, or if I'm idly watching YouTube, that's all idle time. If I'm just pottering around doing something in the house that's not particularly important, that's also idle time. If I'm specifically cleaning the house or showering or cooking, that's not idle time. That is chores. So that's marked separately. What that means, though, is that I spend an inordinate amount of time either watching YouTube, often very casually whilst I'm half asleep on the sofa because I'm in pain or I'm too tired, or I'm spending it scrolling through social media or chatting on Gilded or Discord. Or now Twitter. I've been trolling a fair bit on Twitter the last few days because hilarity. Elon Musk bought Twitter and the entirety of the Twitterverse has collapsed. It's been very, very funny to follow. But anyway, I spend way too much time doing this, and I need to cut back. So I'm going to continue to mark down how I spend each hour each day. Recording videos and editing and uploading videos, I have that marked separately. Anything involving guests, that's all marked separately as well. But for example, today I was up at around 10 o'clock because, again, I'm not feeling too well. So I came downstairs, I had a short conversation on the phone with my dad, and then I spent a bit of time just kind of idly watching YouTube videos and not really doing anything of note. About 1 o'clock, so that would be 3 hours of idle time. About 1 o'clock, I decide to sit and watch a TV program. And watching TV, I count separately because that's actively doing a thing. So I watched a TV program that I actually sat and gave my full attention. I wasn't scrolling through Twitter. I wasn't, putting YouTube on in the background. I actually sat and watched it. And then 2 o'clock, I set up my camera. I planned out what I was going to say, and I prepared for this video, which I'm recording now. It's not yet 3. So that means that I will have spent an hour on TV and an hour on recording this video. But I've been up now for 5 hours, and 3 of those hours were idle time. And that's very wasteful. And that's one of the things I want to address, is I'm having so many hours of wasteful time. It feels like I need to spend about 2 hours of idle time just pissing about before my brain is active and awake enough for me to do anything of use. And that is worrying. It feels like I'm a motor that's struggling to get going. So I want to try and break out of that cycle. And one of the things I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and limit the amount of time I'm spending on the internet in general. Obviously, I still want to chat with all of you guys in Gilded, but I'm going to be avoiding using a lot of other things, and I'm going to remove YouTube from my living room TV, because I think one of the big problems is when I'm feeling a bit down or feeling a bit in pain, I'll switch the YouTube app on and I'll just play random things, rather than either watching a film or reading a book or doing something that I feel I would get some actual enjoyment out of. So that's something I think I'm gonna do. I'll still be able to put YouTube on the TV if I want to. I can always cast it from my phone or my computer if I really want to watch a video on the screen. But removing the YouTube app from the TV, I think, is going to be a massive, massive boon for me. So that's something I'm going to do. And by tracking the hours, I'm hopefully going to be able to devote enough time to reading. My aim is a minimum of 3 hours a day. If I'm spending that much time per day, I'm good. Now, I thought maybe it was the video games that was really affecting my reading. And yeah, the end of March and the beginning of April, yeah, the video games were eating into my reading time, as I expected them to, because there were 2 really big releases. By the end of March, it was all idle time. I have not switched on the PlayStation in 9 days. 9 days I've not switched on the PlayStation at all. You can tell by my trophy by my trophy tracking. I track all the trophies I get. I haven't achieved a single one in 9 days. And I generally power through a fair few trophies when I actually play games. So my aim for today, I'm going to put this video up. I'm going to record a couple of other videos because I've got a few other things I want to talk about. And then whilst these are rendering and uploading, I can sit and read some more from my books. I might switch on the PlayStation and play a game, but I want to actually use the time productively. I want to use it properly. So that's my aim, that's my hope. With any luck, I'll be able to track what I'm doing and I'll actually get through some of these books. But I genuinely don't know how other people pull it off. Now, I know that I have ADHD and I have chronic fatigue. I know that those problems are very real problems, but it does feel like I struggle to do something that everyone else pulls off with ease. And I can't be the only one, surely. People say don't judge yourself by comparing yourself to other people, and maybe that's true. But everyone else I see on BookTube manages to read through 3, 4, 5 times as many books as I do, and they do it whilst holding down a full-time job. I struggle to find time to do my hobbies, and I'm in the house on my own all day, every day, with no real responsibilities. Yet I'm still struggling to do my hobbies. I'm still struggling to find time to do something other than just sit and veg out. And that is depressing. So I'm going to proactively change that. I'm going to keep this journal. I'm going to keep you guys informed, because now that I've told you, it's a psychological trick. I've made myself accountable to other people, because you guys watching, you can keep me accountable. So you're going to know what I'm supposed to be reading, and you're going to know if I don't do it, because I'm not going to be able to discuss it with you. So anyway, if you want to discuss these books and the other various different things we discuss, join us in Gilded. The Gilded server, it's still slow going. There's only 30 odd members, but we're actively talking. There's usually a conversation going on each day. It's quite expansive, and you do need to actively go into your profile and give yourself tags to join the different areas. When you go in, you'll only have access to general chat, and sometimes that can go days without a comment. Doesn't mean we're not on there, it just means we're in the other sections that you don't have access to. We could be chatting in the gaming section or the book section. If you don't switch it on, those rooms are closed to you. But you can just switch them on at any time. You just right click on your username and add the tags to yourself, and you can go anywhere on that server. Or you can just ask a moderator to add them for you if you prefer that. So yeah, come and chat with us. Hold me to account, and let's see what we make of all of these different books. I want to actually read through a few things. I want to talk about these things. I want to get a real sense of literature. My whole plan is that by the end of 2023, I want to be able to say that I have tasted enough world literature that I have a good, solid grasp of what is good. I want to have an objective grasp of what is good. So I've been reading fantasy and I've been reading sci-fi recently. I want to be reading more classics this year. I want to read a few more sci-fi and fantasy that I've been missing out on, a few modern books. Next year, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing, but I'm going to try and plug some gaps. So this is all part of my plan to make it so that by the end of 2023, I can look back and go, I'm not an expert, but I'm speaking from a point of reasonable authority where I can say, I have experience in this. I know what I'm talking about why. So that's my hope. And until then, thanks for following along, and hopefully I can give you some interesting insights into the books I've read. Until then, bye.